I lived in an old apartment in 2002. The place was built in 1900, so it was just over 100 years old when I moved in. The living room and kitchen were fine, but the bathroom and bedroom were unnerving. Like, I just always felt like I was being watched, especially in the bedroom if the closet door was open. Those unnerving feelings just became moderately uncomfortable as I settled in. I felt safe in the bedroom, but only if the door was locked. One night I was dead asleep when there was a loud bang on my bedroom door. When I got up the courage to get out of bed, I checked the apartment and all the windows were closed and locked from the inside. The door still had the chain secured. No one was in there. I mentioned the closet in the bedroom. I never liked going in there, and I never liked if the door was open. For some reason in my head, I would hear gasping noises. So, for that reason, the closet stayed closed. A month or so after I was woken to the bang on my door, I was dead asleep. But something woke me up, and it was a pressure on me, like being held down. It was pitch black in my room. I couldn't see anything, but I knew something was standing over me. When I could finally turn on a bedside lamp, no one was there. After then, I couldn't sleep in the dark. I had to sleep with a lamp on. That incident scared the life out of me, and after the unnerving feeling of being watched intensified, friends would come over and comment about being uncomfortable in the bathroom, like being watched. It became so uncomfortable for me. When I had the chance to move to another unit, I jumped at it. I packed up and got out. After me, several people rented the apartment, and they would move out within months. I became friendly with the building manager, and I told him I felt the place was haunted. He kind of laughed it off. Years after, they were renovating the place. Building manager was doing some painting in there. The building owner was there too. I went and checked out the apartment. It looked nicer. It didn't feel as creepy. I got to talking with the building owner, and through the course of conversation, he just throws it out there that a former tenant committed suicide in the closet by hanging themselves. He also mentioned that the original designer of the building lived in that apartment and died in there. I wasn't mad when I heard that, but felt validated that what I experienced was real. My wife and I stayed at a nice hotel in downtown Pittsburgh. It was where I asked her to marry me after a lavish meal. I picked the room because it came with a huge Japanese soaking tub that me, a 6'1" man, could barely see over the edge of. Anyway, the first night we stayed there, we were sleeping in the single king bed. I believe the alarm clock said it was 2 or 3 a.m. To my left, and just a few feet from me, I heard the sound of what seemed like a pencil slowly rolling down a sloped surface. It was so deliberate and loud that it woke us both up. It was also so deliberate that while my heart thumped in my chest from the sudden noise, I quickly convinced myself that it was a pencil sliding off the desk in our room, and I went back to sleep. The next morning, to my surprise, I found that A, there were no pencils in the room, and B, there was no desk. It was my first night in the room, so I assumed that it, like other hotels, had a place to sit and write. Well, that was not the case. The only thing I could find to write with were ballpoint pens with their caps on. They wouldn't make that distinctive, loud noise that a ridged, wooden pencil makes as it rolls. Furthermore, there were no sloped surfaces in the room for anything to suddenly roll off of in the middle of the night. The whole thing was weird enough for us to talk about it that morning. I do not believe in ghosts, to be honest. I'd love to encounter something unexplained. I entertained the idea of a ghost pencil, but knew in my head it had an exclamation grounded in reality. But that's not all that happened. That night, we were both in the soaking tub. The water was up to my chin. It was great. We were in the middle of February, a cold and miserable month in Pittsburgh. We were sloshing around in the tub and having a blast, pretending we were rich. And then, from the other room, we heard the buzzing of an old microphone hooked up to a PA system. Basically, that sound of feedback that precedes an announcement. The whole room filled with the buzzing sound of microphone feedback. Our hearts thumped in our chests yet again, and then we both practically jumped out of our own skins. We heard the distinctive sound of someone blowing into a microphone to test it. You could see it in your head, it was so distinctive, just like the pencil. My heart went from thumping wildly to thrumming like a hummingbird's. Naked, I leapt from the tub and threw a towel around myself. That was a man blowing into a microphone, I said. My wife stayed in the tub, scared and quiet. I searched our room and did not find a speaker or any kind of speaker grill embedded into a wall or a ceiling. We could not for the life of us find a potential source for the sound, other than an iHome speaker that was already playing music from my iPhone. So that was our story. We still had one more night. We were exhilarated by our engagement and the ghosts that haunted the hotel. A week later, I had the thought to email the hotel. I asked them about their building. Pittsburgh is an old town, and downtown Pittsburgh is a very, very old town. They got back to me and explained, as my jaw dropped, that they used to be an old telephone factory. I don't know why I found meaning in that explanation, or why it made everything click so well. But my thoughts immediately went to the sounds of a factory, the PA system, the drafting table, all relics from another time in that building's life. When my grandparents bought their home for a family of 10, my grandpa found a fake wall upstairs. He tore it down to make more room for the family. Behind the wall were children's clothes and play toys, almost like they walked off the room in a hurry. My mom told me stories of sitting in her room and something circling the walls around her, sounding like wallpaper being torn. When she moved out, my aunt moved into the same room. She would wake up with pictures she hung up, laying on her chest in the morning. My cousins also have stories of hearing footsteps coming up the stairs and stopping outside their door in the middle of the night. I still don't go upstairs at their house because it's always cold and I get weird vibes up there. Even in my adult life, I have scary dreams that take place in their upstairs. I came home from work one day to grab my spare tires. My sister was away at school 7 hours away, and neither of my parents were going to be home for another 5 hours at minimum. I ran in, changed my clothes, grabbed my tires, and then drove to a garage to get them installed. I got home 2 hours later, and as I walked into the living room, there was just a chair sitting in the middle of the hallway and was facing the front door. I thought nothing of it, but didn't recognize the chair as being one that we owned. It was a standard metal folding chair that you'd buy for a couple bucks at a retail store. I folded it up and propped it up against my dad's workbench in our garage. My mom gets home a couple hours later, and I ask her in passing why she left a metal chair in the middle of the hallway. She tells me we don't own any metal chairs, and that she hadn't been home up until an hour ago. I told her I came home and there was a metal chair just sitting in the middle of the hallway after I've gotten back from the garage. She told me to show her the chair, and when I went out to the garage to show it to her, it was gone. I looked high and low for that metal chair but couldn't find it. I swore to her that I wasn't on drugs and that I wasn't imagining things. She thought what I was telling her was strange, but didn't pay much attention to it. I never saw that chair again, nor do I know where it came from or where it went. For about 10 years now, my Nana has been living in a nursing home. She had a stroke, and mentally she is not at all there. She still recognizes us when we visit, and gets happy to see us, but she often talks gibberish, thinking she's in a distant memory in the past. It makes me sad because she and I have always had a close connection growing up. My parents both worked a lot, and she would stay with me. She used to know when I was lying. She could always sense when I was sick, even when she wasn't over. And she and I are eerily both similar in personality and looks. There are pictures of her when she was 21, and it could be me in the picture. We were very close growing up, and I love her dearly. I introduced her to my now husband when we started dating in college. He is from a different country than I am, and I live in his country. So we had been dating a few years when my visa was going to expire. In order for us to live in the one place, we decided to get married. However, we were still young, fresh out of university, and decided to just elope. We decided to get officially married at a courthouse while announcing our engagement, and then having a wedding a few years later. Official documents and wedding ceremonies are separated in my husband's country anyways. No one knew of our plan. We were, and still are, stupidly in love, and thrilled to have such a crazy secret between us two. In hindsight, it was stupid, and no one would have judged us, especially considering we are still happily together years later. But we still decided to hide it because we were stupid kids. So we flew to visit my parents in my home country and announce our engagement, and my dad picked us up from the airport We were chatting in the car when he tells us that my Nana was freaking out while he visited her the other day. The day we decided to elope. Why was she freaking out? She announced to my whole family that she saw in her dreams that I had eloped and was now married. They dismissed her because they didn't expect that at all. She kept insisting and was incredibly lucid about it. She raised her voice, which she hadn't done before the stroke. My dad had mentioned, because he thought it was sweet, that she was so worried about this and became so lucid. My husband and I just got silent in the car, and I went cold. We don't know how she knew that, or if it was just coincidence. But she knew somehow. We went to visit her a few days later, and she didn't remember it at all. She was thrilled we were engaged. We are happily married now, and had our wedding and stuff, and no one ever found out we had eloped before the wedding day, except my Nana apparently. This was at the house we lived in for about 7 years. Many strange things happened in that house. You could hear voices murmuring from time to time. I saw a shadow person. Saw someone stick their head in their room once. None of it felt hostile, but the same couldn't be said for the pervasive feeling my mother and I both felt if we went out front at night. She and I both felt like there was something watching, and it wasn't friendly. On this particular night, it was about midnight or so, and I felt like driving to the 24/7 grocery store since I wanted some snacks. As I stepped out the front door, I saw something out of the corner of my eye and turned to look. There was this very tall thing just floating, for lack of a better term. I'd almost describe it as hanging, but there was nothing holding it up. Outside my brother's window, it was seemingly covered in a sheet that had once been white, but was extremely dirty, so it was more off-white and got brown with mud and dirt the further down it went. There were no visible feet, nor eyes or face, but I could tell it was staring at my brother's window. As I stared at it, it turned to look at me, and I remember feeling like one of those butterfly specimens pinned to a board. It was as though its stare was physically holding me in place. It felt like an eternity, but only a second or two had passed, and it looked back at the window, the pressure lifting and then vanished. Right as it vanished, there was a fluttering of wings in the tree above, and one of our neighborhood's owls came to perch there. In a way, it felt like the owl came to my defense, as silly as that may sound. Our cul-de-sac loved the pair of owls. They were more like neighbors to us, so maybe it was just protective of a fellow neighbor. That's how I like to think of it anyway. In any event, I decided it might be best to just make some popcorn or something that night instead. Come to think of it, I don't think I ever told my brother about the thing. I probably should. About 5 years and 2 boyfriends ago, I moved into an old farmhouse with my then significant other. He was a hoarder and was embarrassed about the state his house was in after his wife had left him. He had an RV, and that's where he slept, because there was just garbage, clothes, boxes up to your knees in every room of the house. Me, being extremely distressed by the clutter, cleaned that house, down to the cobwebby corners of the ceiling. It took me weeks, but I Murphy's oiled every inch of wood, filled his truck with 10 loads of garbage. The very first night I was there, things were weird. At that point, I had only cleared out part of the living room. The boyfriend snored unbearably loud, so I opted to sleep inside on the couch while he slept out in his camper. I had just had a fight with my mother and was lying awake around 4 a.m., fuming about it. I heard my boyfriend come in the back door, muttering to himself as usual. He was opening and closing drawers and cabinets in the kitchen. Figured he was searching for something. Finally, I got up because I was already awake. Maybe I could help him find whatever it was. The kitchen was 5 feet from where I was, and when I walked in, there was no one there. I looked around and called for him, but he wasn't there. I don't get scared easily, and at this point I was just curious about where he was. I went out to the camper and could hear him snoring hard before I even got to the door. I shook him awake and asked him gently what he had needed in the house. He said he hadn't left the camper all night. I thought, he was sleepwalking. When I went back inside, though, I noticed it had snowed lightly in the night, and the only tracks leading up to the camper were mine. A couple days later, I moved my 2 cats in. They are super on edge, a lot of growling, acting out of character, especially in the middle of the night. I completely dismissed that as it was a new, unfamiliar place. Obviously, they were uncomfortable. I had finally gotten the bedroom habitable, and they would not cross the threshold into it. The first night we slept in the bedroom was when I started to fear the house. The bed was up against a window that faced out to the cornfield. My guy insisted on sleeping on the outside of the bed, leaving me pressed against the window. I got this horrible feeling. Something was right outside the window, and I was frantic to the point of tears. I kept telling him there was something out there, and he said I was being dramatic, which was stupid because I'm just not. You spend your whole life being logical and calm, and when something weird happens, no one believes you. I slept on the couch. The next day, I noticed a handprint on the top of the bedroom window that I had just cleaned the day prior. I held my hand up to it, and it was thrice the size of my own hand. Bigger than any person's handprint I've ever seen. And it wasn't just a print, though. It was elongated, as if the hand had dragged down the window. Still could be an explanation. Even though I had cleaned that window the day before and would have noticed. Except that print was over 9 feet off the ground, directly over an open coal cellar. I showed my boyfriend, and he told me something surprising. His ex-wife thought there was something wrong with the house too. She was making dinner one day, and he had gotten home from work. Her back was turned to him, and they had a full conversation. Then she looked out of the kitchen window and saw him pull up in his truck. He still blew it off with me, just telling me I was paranoid and such. All this time, I assumed he was right, dismissed my instincts, and went about things normally. Then one morning in the spring, I got up to use the bathroom. It was 4:46 in the morning, and I knew the time because I had just checked my phone when I got up. The whole bedroom was light from the sunrise, and I quietly climbed back into bed. The house is all wood paneling, and because of my arachnophobia, I had the bed scooted about 5 inches away from the wall where our heads were. I laid down and tucked my arm up under the pillow with my hand over the edge. The second I closed my eyes, an icy cold hand grabbed me by the wrist and yanked down hard. I bolted up and, in a state of complete terror, shook my boyfriend awake and asked if he was messing with me. He wasn't. I'll never forget that grip because I had to struggle to get my hand back. I called my close friend and she said, "You know that there's a cemetery within view of your bedroom, right?" I had forgotten, but being a practical person, it had never occurred to me that there might be a connection. She said, "Let's try something." She came over with a sagebrush and we smudged the house. We were both laughing at ourselves as we did it. But the thing is, nothing weird happened after that. Well, except me falling into a hole in the floor, but I blamed that on my own clumsiness. The relationship withered. I moved out, but we remained friends. He says nothing strange has happened since I left. Hey everyone, Dismal Hero here, and I'd like to thank you for checking out the video. Please subscribe if you haven't already, like and share the video if you enjoyed it. I'm always looking for new and exciting stories, so if you have a scary encounter that has happened to you, please email it to me in the link in my description. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you back here again next time.